Hello, everyone. First, just let me know that you can hear me. I see that some people are arriving and are checking in the comments threads. Got some South Africans, got somebody from the Netherlands. Great, can hear me well. Somebody from France, somebody from Mexico. It's a nice, good international spread we've got going there. Awesome, guys. Thanks for showing up for this webinar. Somebody from Saudi Arabia. Amazing. How to DIY your pool to a natural pool for less than $800 using the floating wetland system is what I'm going to be getting into. So just before we get started, I hope that you're all well. I am very grateful that you're here. My name is Andy Jameson. I am a natural pool professional. I am a designer, a creator, a builder of natural pools. I preach about them and I educate about them. And that is me. That is me currently. That's what I've done for about 7 years now. But it wasn't always that way, which I'll get into shortly. Just some housekeeping. If you have questions as we're going, I urge you to write them down and save them to the end. I'm going to do a Q&A at the end, but probably 90% of the questions that are likely to get asked, I will cover, and then I will look for some that fall outside of that at the end. And that's pretty much it. We've got a nice stream of people pouring in, so I'm just going to wait a few more minutes because it's steadily climbing. Where are we now? 2 minutes past 8. Okay. Let me just take this brief pause to have some water. Okay, so I was introducing myself as the natural pool guy, but I wanted to start with a story because it wasn't always this way. I started with my neighbor's pool, in fact. Before I was doing the natural pools, I was a permaculture designer. So I was working with sustainable systems. I was working with soil, I was working with plants, I was working with microbes, I was working with water, very importantly, how to recycle water. Where I live, we recycle all of our grey water through gravel and plants, actually. We have a food forest and we turn our sewage into cooking gas with a biodigester. So I was no stranger to these things, but I'd never done a pool. And I'm going to tell you a story about the first pool I did, just to break the ice. That's me and my son, my firstborn son, Ash, standing in that pool. And this was my neighbor's pool. And it was back in 2017 during the great Cape Town water crisis. It's national news, but Cape Town very nearly ran out of water. We had a day zero that we were counting down to, and everybody was rationed down to 50 liters a day. People were showering into buckets and using that to flush their toilets. For those of you who are South African, I'm sure you remember this well. And the sight of a half-empty pool is probably a familiar sight because you weren't allowed to top up your pools. So I convinced my neighbor to turn his pool into a natural pool because, as I explained to him, he then had a reservoir of drinking water or bathing water that he could use. And I had to devise a system where it could still drop halfway down, which is where the floating wetlands come in. But the execution of this didn't go quite according to plan. At first, we emptied the pool because it was very dirty and it needed some holes fixed, which is not a prerequisite in this process. But we emptied it and painted it grey, and then we filled it up with water that had to be bought from a farm, beautiful fresh water. And when I made my first wetland of this kind, I used the wrong kind of coir material, and it had all of this. It basically was like putting a giant tea bag into the swimming pool, if you can imagine that. All the water went brown, and within a few days it had gone anaerobic from all of the organic load. There were little larvae, insect larvae swimming in the water. It was very far from an idyllic oasis. And I had to drain all the water, get new water at my expense, and then figure out how to do these wetlands properly. But luckily the story ended well because I eventually managed to figure it out and get them a beautiful pool. But it did take some trial and error. Aside from the tea bag mistake, there were other things I learned along the way. And it wasn't quite as easy as it had seemed in the YouTube video that I'd found. And that was where I started. That was 7 years ago. These days, I'm running my own natural pool company, which is called Leaf and Stone. You probably found me on Instagram or YouTube and have some idea of that. And I do everything from small natural pools and small conversions. This is a 2x2 meter one. That's a small little conversion we did. Another floating wetland conversion. Right up to 1 acre aquascapes with waterfalls, swim ponds. This one had a 65-meter river. It's basically like a water park. That's a beautiful, quite sizable natural pool we did in Franschhoek. This is what I'm currently working on. It's on an eco estate, it's going to be a public natural swimming pool with a beach. That's a rendering of that one there. So that's currently what I'm doing. And I'm also very passionate about the educational aspect and the DIY natural pools. This is partly because natural pools are very expensive and beyond the reach of many people. I get many requests for natural pools where people can't afford them to be built professionally. And I help a lot of people out on a one-on-one consultation basis. With the DIY pools, I've done lots of in-person workshops, and I've now been doing these online workshops, which I'll get more to later to my masterclass that can be joined. So, an overview of the talk. It's going to be an hour, and then I'm going to go into Q&A, and then we'll stick around for as long as that takes. Yeah, probably about half an hour. And I'm going to kick off with the fundamentals of natural pools. And I'm just briefly checking the comments. Somebody says, "Is it live?" It's definitely live. I am here in the flesh. This is not a recording. Don't know how I can prove that to you. There's some way I could. There's thanks. He says thanks. Always good just to confirm that. I'm not AI either. Soon I probably will be. And that's a topic for another day, but I'm not AI. But if I was, could you tell? Who knows? If you can think of a question to test whether I'm AI, you're welcome to ask me. So I'm going to start off with the fundamentals of natural pools. Just looking at questions like, are they safe? What about mosquitoes and wildlife? Are they simple to maintain? And how do the operational expenses stack up against conventional chlorine pools? I'm going to introduce you, beg your pardon, I'm going to introduce you to the floating wetland concept. And then I'm going to show you the online course I was mentioning. I'm going to give you a look inside that. That's my step-by-step online masterclass on the floating wetland. Sorry, I seem to have a frog in my throat. Cool, so let's just explore the fundamentals of how natural pools work. I always like to start this with a small ritual, which is this quote. I have this printed on the wall of my office as a reminder. It's by W.H. Auden, and he says, "Thousands have lived without love, but not one without water." And I have this as a reminder because it's, especially for me as a professional, very easy to get lost in technical stuff, filters and biofilter and reticulation and plumbing and fittings and waterproofing and chemistry. But at the end of the day, why I do this and why I'm so passionate about natural pools is because I believe that, well, I know that water is fundamental to human life. And that is why we're seeing such a surge in interest in natural pools. It's because people fundamentally know this, right? We are hardwired to respect, desire, and yearn for pure living water. And I think people have come around to this fact and had enough of chlorine. So that's just to ground us in our intention for the webinar. And then I will just put a question to you guys. Who here has swum in a man-made natural pool? The reason I say man-made is because there's quite a distinct difference between a man-made natural pool and something you would swim in nature, like a dam or a lake or a river. In nature, especially in South Africa, a lot of mountain pools, for instance, are very high in tannins, so they are dark like tea. You certainly can't see the bottom. Maybe in other parts of the world you get springs or glacial water that can be very clear, probably very cold as well. So it's quite rare to have soft, living natural water that you can swim in, that you can drink, but it's so clear and clean that you can see to the bottom and there's no sludge underneath. So it's quite a distinctive experience. And what's important about this is also just to point out that we're not talking about ponds here. We're talking about swimming pools with the same clarity as a chlorine pool. And also just to note that you can turn your pool into a pond if you want, and that's cool, but you can also turn it into a beautiful clear swimming pool. Yeah, so crystal clear water is what we are after. So in terms of the design of natural pools, they can be very formal. They can be very informal and organic. These would have the same level of clarity. You can see there's a swimming rectangle in the middle of that one, but it just looks more like a pond, but that's definitely not a pond. Some are very small, but they all work on the same principle, and that is the power of nature. The water is purified through a biological filtration process. It's using living organisms such as plants and beneficial bacteria to clean the water. So with all natural pools, you have this concept of a swim zone where you swim, and then you have what's called the regeneration zone, or a wetland, or a biofilter. And traditionally that has been gravel and plants. So let me just take you to this diagram here. So that's your swim zone, your swimming pool, and that is your regeneration zone. The water is, the very basic principle is that it's pumped and moved around from the swimming zone and through this wetland. There's a whole lot of gravel here. There's plants, roots growing into the gravel. There's submerged aquatics. There's marginals, things like sedges. And the water is going to move through all of this gravel, and it's going to come into contact with biofilm. That's beneficial bacteria. Biofilm is like the stuff you get on your teeth. The slippery film you get on rocks in rivers, that's all beneficial bacteria. It's good stuff. It's sucking nutrients out the water and it's passing them to the plants. And the plants are using those nutrients to grow. And when the plants and the biofilm are using up the nutrients, then there's nothing left for algae to grow. So algae needs nutrients, as do pathogens, by the way, nasty things in the water. They like stagnant water that's not moving, that's warm, and that's high in nutrients. That's what makes water not great for swimming. So when it's moving, when it's low, very, very low in nutrients, then there's going to be no algae and there's no pathogens. The pathogens are also going to get trapped in this wetland. They're going to get sorted out by a whole host of processes, what we call antibiosis. So fungus and bacteria will kill pathogens, like penicillin. Antibiotics is actually a fungus. So basically you've got this concentrated ecosystem that is mopping up nutrients and life and bugs, well, not really bugs, but pathogenic bacteria. And what comes out is beautiful, clean water. So it's a little mini ecosystem that is created. Okay, so that leads us to, are natural pools safe? And they are safe as you want them to be, because you can use things like UV sterilizers. I don't use them sort of 90% of the time. It's kind of up to the client. I do advise them in tropical climates. I'll come back to that later. But a UV sterilizer will kill bacteria that's moving through it. And you can keep the pool very safe, but you don't actually need them in many instances. I regularly drink the water. I will show you proof of this. Here I do have some proof. So this is me drinking. This pool does not have a UV sterilizer. And there it is. Here it comes. Me drinking the water. There we go. Perfectly safe. So somebody's asking, don't you need good bacteria? Was that in reference to the sterilizer? You certainly do. The sterilizer only kills water that is moving through it. All the good stuff stays locked inside the wetland. That's the biofilm is sticky, so it sticks to the roots of the plants, it sticks to the gravel, it stays there. So if bad things come into the swim zone, they get killed by the sterilizer. So that's how the good stuff remains. And then I always like to say, if you're happy to swim in a lake, in a dam, in a river, in nature, then you're actually safer swimming in a natural pool, because it's a concentrated biofilter and the water's constantly moving through it. So you certainly have nothing to worry about. If you're squeamish in that regard, then you probably shouldn't be on this webinar. You know what is not safe is chlorine. Chlorine is an irritant to the skin, the eyes, and the respiratory system. It's been known to increase instances such as asthma and bronchitis, and this has been shown by various research papers. And it also kills all life, and it kills all bacteria, and it creates carcinogenic substances which can pollute groundwater, surface water, and your body. So remember, guys, all of the questions, you're welcome to put them in the comment thread. I am going to go through them, but if you do have burning questions, try to save them till last, because a lot will be covered. So this is a very common question about natural pools in general. What about mosquitoes and wildlife? So I just realized I spelled mosquitoes wrong in my slide deck. Damn it. So there's no wildlife in a chlorine pool, as they're all dead, firstly, just to point that out. And then you get frogs, which is great, because frogs are the cornerstone species of ecosystems, and we need to look after the frogs. And they're also very good because they eat mosquitoes. Mosquitoes are not a problem at all, because the water is being circulated, it's in movement, it's highly oxygenated. Mosquitoes need still stagnant water that's very low in oxygen. Generally, nasty things, well, as I deem nasty, because none of nature is nasty really, but things that aren't ideal for humans, like mosquitoes and pathogens that might make us sick, generally like elements in nature which are high in nutrients, stagnant, and low in oxygen, right? It's an important factor. This I go in my online course. There's a whole module on how nature cleans water, where we geek out on biofilm and nutrients and all of these things. Just trying to give you an overview here. So backwashing a natural pool is not introducing toxic chemicals into the ecosystems around you, which is a plus. Snakes are only a real concern if you create an oasis in an arid, dry area, right? Because then they're definitely going to be attracted to your natural pool. So that's something you want to consider. Right, so I'm going to slow things down a little bit. I'm going to have a sip of water. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a question to you. Does anyone have a garden? If you do, just say gardener in the comments. That can be any garden, a veggie garden, an ornamental garden. It could be some herbs that you grow on your balcony. And I want you to imagine yourself. So I'm going to move us from the technical space we've just been into a more feeling space. And I want you to imagine that it's a crisp spring morning and you're walking out into your garden and you have got a warm mug of mint tea, perhaps, that you've just picked the mint and put it into the cup, and you are weeding your vegetable garden and you're crushing some rosemary or lavender in your fingers and you're inhaling that scent, and you're really, you're immersed in this garden. I'm sure you can relate if you're into gardens. And you might be tending to some of your plants, noticing what wildlife is there. The bees are burrowing themselves into the flowers, digging for nectar. And now imagine that you're moving into your pool and you're going for a swim, and this experience is as immersive, right? So you can smell the water, it smells earthy. You move over to your wetland and there's bees, they're going for the mint flowers in the wetland, and you can smell the plants, and you're tending to the wetland and you're pulling out dead plants and leaves. And you don't resent any of this because you're a custodian of this little ecosystem that is now your pool. So that is what it's like, the experience of turning a chlorinated pool into a living system, right? So that's really what we are talking about here. Which leads me to the next chapter, which is the floating wetland concept. So let me just start off by explaining how the traditional floating wetland works. How the traditional method of natural pool conversion works. So very similar to how I explained earlier, if one was converting a pool, one would add a regeneration zone next to the pool. So this requires construction. You'd have to build a structure for that and waterproof it with the pool to make them one unit, that is. There's obviously many ways about, you can raise the wetland, lower it. There's many ways of designing it, but the basic concept is you're putting a wetland next to the pool, and that's filled with gravel and plants. And then you end up with this kind of concept, which is beautiful. And this is, we do a lot of conversions like this. You can build the gravel wetland in the pool, and it's simply a matter of space, whether you put it outside or on the inside. You can build this gravel wetland on the inside, and that's a nice example there. Uses a lot of gravel. So this is a pool that was, a retaining wall is built down the middle, and there's about 20 cubes of gravel that have gone in there, and that's a lot of gravel. So the cost to have this professionally done is about $15,000 to $30,000 US dollars. So in rands, it can be anywhere from 150,000 rand to 300,000 rand, depends where you are in the world. Many people come back to me saying that it's too expensive for them, and it's very ambitious to attempt as a DIY project. Not impossible, because I do have clients that I consult that do this, and I am running a course in July on this. But the reason we're here is to talk about the floating wetland concept, which is wonderful for many reasons, has many advantages. So remember in the beginning I was telling you about the half-empty pool and how we converted that. So in the Okavango Delta, you get natural floating wetlands. So what happens there is that they break away from the bank. All of these sedges, there's a lot of papyrus you can see in this picture here. They actually form these floating structures. There's so many gases and bubbles underneath from the decomposition of the plants that they end up floating. And what happens there is you get this huge amount of root mass underneath that's incredible for fish. It's a real haven for wildlife. But you get so many roots that that actually works incredibly well as a filter. They use this to filter urban waterways as well, in fact. That's primarily where I got the concept from as well. And so what we do, the concept here is we place a floating wetland in the pool. So this negates the need for gravel for construction. You don't need to empty the water out of the pool. It can be done in 3 days. It can be done for very low cost, and it works just as well in terms of the clarity you get. So yeah, this is another example from the beginning. This is the pool that we converted. You can see the floating wetland there. It's another one that was done by Nicole and JP. So many advantages, as I was saying. Doesn't need a professional installation team. It never gets clogged. So gravel wetlands get clogged. We're actually, there's one where our team is working on currently. It's 10 years old, and the whole thing has to be taken apart and put back together again. That doesn't happen with the floating wetlands. You don't have to remove the water. Very low environmental impact. There's no cement or gravel to convert. And you can also remove it if you ever want to sell the property. So it's a far smaller investment in terms of how permanent it is. You know, even if you're renting, if you have a long-term rental, great option. And primarily, it's very cost effective. As I was saying, less than $800 in materials, which is about 15,000 Rand for the many South Africans on the call. You know, 1/3 of that is your submersible pump, which you don't necessarily even need. So, and you could source plants, you could actually do it for half that cost in terms of materials, and the labor takes 2 people 3 days. Let me take you through a quick case study. So here's a floating wetland. It's actually 2 different examples. So this one, that's day 1 after this was planted. So I'm not going to go into the details of how to construct this and what growing medium to use, as there's not enough time to go into all of that. That's what the masterclass is for, really. But you can see here, that's day 1. And you can see we've got irrigation on top. So we're moving water through this wetland. And once it's grown and all of the roots are established underneath, you're going to have like a thick mat of roots underneath there. And all of the water is going to be passing through there. That's after 2 months. And get here. That's after 2 months of growth, and then this is after 6 months. So it can take anywhere from 6 months to a year till it's totally mature. But in that time, it's still extremely swimmable and quite functional in clean water, but it's not going to be 100% stable. You really need all of those roots and those plants to establish. And you can also see that once it's established, you can't really see the floating structure anymore. It looks very permanent, like it's part of the pool. You can also put lilies in the pool. They go in a little planter, and there's a secret aquatic soil mix to get them to flourish. You can see their exceptional water quality. The great thing is that this is a very achievable DIY project for anyone. Okay, so let me do something practical with you guys. So if you were to design a floating wetland for your pool, it needs to, I think somebody was asking here, what is the percentage water volume? I can't read that question very well because there's a little costs not seeming to relate to South Africa. Okay, well, we can come back to that later. If you have simply a rectangular pool, the floating wetland, the rule of thumb is that it needs to take up 1/3 of the pool. So you can do that as an L shape. As long as it takes up 1/3 of the surface area of the pool. So it can actually be in any design. If you had a more organic shaped pool, such as that, what's quite nice to do is you can create like an enveloping ring all the way around the outside of the pool, as long as your surface area again is 1/3. There are some practical things. It's much like a garden bed where you don't want it to be much wider than 1 meter, just so that you can reach the middle. And you got illustration. I'm going to go back to that. You've got some considerations like climate, shade. That would really just dictate what plants you're deciding to use, if it's very shady or if it's in full sun, if it's exposed to wind. But that is the basic idea with the design. So someone says is that at least 1/3. Yeah, so that's the minimum. It can certainly be more. The more, the better in a way. So if you have a very, very large pool, if you put more in, it's just going to be more effective and more resilient. A nice design feature to add is if you're using straight edges, you can put timber along the side, like a hardwood. Then it looks really permanent, like it was part of the pool. These are also entirely suitable for ponds and dams, by the way. That's if you search floating wetlands online, that's primarily what you will find. They're used as havens for birds, for nesting, for wildlife, and to mop up nutrients to improve water quality in dams and ponds. It's also important to understand, you saw the irrigation on the top of the one, so there's a reticulation system that goes with this, and there's quite a few different ways of going about that. We sometimes use submersible pumps in the pool, which are low voltage pumps, by the way. And we sometimes use the existing, it's entirely possible to use the existing pool pump. It's actually quite a good idea. It keeps the pool clean. You can use that as a hybrid system with the low power pump and the large pool pump, or you can just use the large pool pump. There's a number of ways to set that up and different pros and cons to weigh up with that in terms of energy use and the results that you're going to get from those different setups. Someone's asking, if you combine the existing pool sand filter with the floating islands, can you go below one surface area? Not really, no, because remember the floating wetland is a biofilter. So the sand filter is mechanical filtration. That is going to be removing, it's like a sieve, it's removing debris, which certainly helps to remove nutrients, yes, but primarily it's pulling debris, pollen, sand, leaves and organic matter out of the water. The dissolved nutrients in the water can only be removed by passing them through a biofilter. So you need both. But the sand filter is going to keep it nice and clean. things like creepy crawlies, skimmers, sand filters. You would continue to use that if you want the pool not to have leaves on the bottom. However you were doing that before, maybe you were vacuuming, or maybe you were using a net, you would still do those things to keep that out the water. The biofilter prevents the algae from growing by pulling the nutrients out of the water. Okay, let me give you some case studies. This is JP and Nicole's pool.
First time getting into a natural pool, you can immediately feel the softness of the water. It's such an evident thing that when you're present in a natural pool, it just feels softer, just feels more aligned. Being recent custodians of this property and landscape for the last 1 year, we were always drawn to this type of environment, and coming here really just wanted to be more a part of it. And we looked at the pool, and the chlorinated pool definitely felt disjointed, and it felt like it wasn't a good combination. So we definitely made the move and decided to make a good move to move towards a natural pool.
So Andy's asking me what's changed in our lives since we had the pool, and it really is something that has been just so giving. It's just been, every day it's grown with character and light, and the love that the kids are, playing and interacting with this living thing that is right on our doorstep.
It's a game changer for us as a family. We even find ourselves when the municipal water's out, literally bathing ourselves in our pool water. We love the fact that it grows and that it's part of the ecosystem around us, especially where we are, and the fact that it inhabits frogs and different types of aquatic life, which is really incredible for us to watch, especially for our children to observe the growth. So maintenance has really been easy to maintain. Previously, with chlorinated pools, it was always a mission. I mean, always trying to test a pool and put in the right chlorine, and you're just almost scared about how much chemicals are going into the pool in order to get that clarity that you so-called look for, which is really not something that we would look for. But just because it's that type of pool, it needs to stay super clear. This pool has almost needed nothing of our attention, purely just to keep the leaf skimmer on, and that's pretty much it. And then the rest of it does itself besides filling it up the water. Super easy.
To be able to drink the water, to be able to have soft skin when you're going for a swim, and really is just fitting to our environment, definitely. The stream being there, it just feels like the stream is closer to us. This living, breathing organism that's just enriching our lives in so many ways.
1/3 of the pool is a wetland, 2/3 is really swimming area. That said, I feel like the one part of the wetland is really a feature in the pool. It's like having a floating, plant, just like you would have a plant in your house. It really becomes a part of your pool. And really looking onto the pool and having the wetland apparent is really amazing to look at. So it doesn't take away from the swimmable area, in my opinion. There's more than enough space. We had quite a small pool to begin with, and the choice was really to add another pool to make a wetland separately, just to gain all that space, or take one part of it away and put the wetland there. And we made the decision to put the wetland within the pool that we had, and perfect decision for us. It was one of my concerns when doing the natural pool, what about mosquitoes? And it has not been a thing at all. In fact, I think it keeps them at bay. And I'm super happy with the frogs around us, because I think they assist with that in as well. But just because there's so much life around us, I think everything is helping you, and you are helping it. It's really been a pleasure.
It's really like a no-brainer. Looking at the chlorine just what it was, yes, on an aesthetic point of view, but the core fundamentals of the water structure is just not what we want to, be immersing ourselves in.
Yeah, so having the wetland floating in the water has had no concerns for us. We have had our dog try go get a ball and walk across it, so it sunk a little bit, but then as soon as he got off it, it just popped straight back up. No damage to the plants, no other concerns. Slight bit of mulch around, just easily picked up with a net.
Nothing can compare to coming outside and seeing an owl perched on the tree above you, and you know that he's looking for one of the frogs in the pool. And that's been super special.
Oh, yeah, I'm back, sorry. So that's JP and Nicole, aren't they great? Such a beautiful pool. And this here is a pool to pond. I think somewhere in the question somebody was asking how applicable this is to, where was it? Yeah, somebody said, could you please touch on how these can work with the use of ponds by wild birds? So it's somewhat related. But this was a swimming pool. This is in fact, for those in South Africa, this is Peter Dirk Ace's pool in Darling. It was an old deserted pool that they didn't swim in anymore. And we put in a floating wetland. That's a floating wetland, but they wanted it as a pond. So that's why you can see here there's no skimmer or pool filter going here. There is water circulation going on, and excellent clarity to the bottom, but primarily serves as a pond. This as well, this is just after it was installed, and they recently sent me these photos. And the net is, because the heron, you can see there's lots of fish in there, so herons keep eating the fish. So this is not really used as a swimming pool, it's very much used as a pond. Great for people who, maybe the kids have left home and they're not big swimmers and they've got this, this chlorine pool that's become a hassle in the back garden, to turn it into a pond with a floating wetland system. It's another small example of a conversion. So that is the floating wetland. Okay, so some more questions. We're going to get to a Q&A shortly. So as I was mentioning, there is an online course for this whole process. Many of those questions, everything that's being asked here, we go into that in the online course. And I just want to, I did promise that I was going to go into that a little bit and show you guys inside the course a little bit. So that is a full step-by-step video course, and it's opened up today, and I'm only opening that up for another week, for 7 days, and then the course starts, and it features live Q&A, which is why it's a there's a full video series that's available on demand, but then we have live Q&A sessions in which people can interact with me and ask questions. Let me show you inside quickly. So last time I did this, there was an audio loop at this point. Is everything fine? Let me know if there's a crazy audio loop. So this is inside the course. you can see here module 1, we've got very much expanding on what we talked about today, introduction to natural pools, natural pool design, the benefits, frequently asked questions. And there's a whole module on how nature cleans water. So that's mechanical and biological filtration. Difference, what those mean, beneficial bacteria, how that works, nutrients, which nutrients, how we control algae, how that whole process works in detail. And it's all it's detailed, but it's all very user-friendly, and I've tried to explain it in a way that is not boring or too sciencey. Very easy to understand. Understanding how algae works. Because with this kind of living system, it's good to understand the fundamentals of what's going on, right? So you can interact with them. Then we go into the whole floating wetlands, how those work, how it's constructed, what materials to use, where you can get them, alternative material ideas, why are we using those materials, aquatic plants, which plants to use, how to plant them, how to look after them, finishing touches, things like adding the timber, etc., inoculation and fertilization. Then there's a whole section on the reticulation, the pumps, the plumbing, the filters, how to put that all together, how to design it. And then finally, maintenance and troubleshooting. And there's a private group that one gets access to. So currently we have people on that group who are, and this is from all over the world. So we have people exchanging ideas from designs, sharing pictures of what they've done. It's awesome to see. People are trialing different plants. We've got somebody who's building one in a freezing climate and reporting back to us on how that's going. And then there's live Q&A sessions as well. And lots of resources. So what plumbing is required, how to put it all together, diagrams, pump specifications, pump sizes, material lists for different countries, plant lists for different countries. And as I mentioned, this opens today. Enrollment is going to close in 1 week. But I did promise that for attending the live webinar, and we've still got pretty much 95% attendance, which is great. Thank you for staying with us. As a reward, I'm giving a live attendance discount of 10%. So that, if you want to claim that, just leave a comment of 199. And I will send you a coupon code. I'll send it to you either, and towards the end, I'll put it in the comment thread. So that's a comment code that you, when checking out, you just punch that in and it'll give you that 10%. And there is a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you're unhappy or you find my teaching style to be really annoying, you should have a good sense of that by now, though. I will give you your money back because I want you to be happy. And I believe a lot in this product. I've worked really, really hard to put this together. I'm very, very proud of it. And I very much doubt that you will be unhappy. So I'm going to move on to another question. And that is, have you ever had a DIY project that you really wanted to do, but the thought of actually doing the work seemed overwhelming for one person? You might be thinking that right now, and I wanted to share this with you. You can comment saying overwhelm in the comments if you can relate. But for those of you who know permaculture, there's a thing called a permablitz, which, you know, when I did a food forest, I put it off for years because I was a bit overwhelmed at doing it myself. And I organized a permablitz where I invited my friends, my family, my neighbors, and my enemies to come and help me. And we planted 21 fruit trees, we mulched and composted everything, we fertilized, we put in shrubs, basically nailed the whole thing in a day. And we had a joel, for those of you who are not South African, that is a good time whilst we were doing it. And it's a great way to go about doing this conversion as well, because many hands make light work. Alrighty, so I'm going to move on to some frequently asked questions. Okay, somebody, let me just get to the questions here. I'm just going to move that to center stage. Okay, somebody's asking how long do they get access to the course? For life. So it's lifetime access. You can, well, let me actually, I think my first FAQ is common course questions. So do you have to follow along? You don't. Because of the nature of this kind of project, you know, I don't expect people necessarily to follow along. What a lot of people do is they'll watch all the material, they'll get a sense of what they need to do, and then they'll get all their materials, and then, you know, they'll set aside a time to do it. And I run the live Q&A once a month. So you can join us in the first month, but maybe 6 months down the line, you want to do your live Q&A. You can hop in there. You can hop in 5 years' time if I'm still doing them. If I'm not, you know, all of these live sessions get recorded onto the system. You can go and look at all of the previous ones, and the whole community group is there. So, but I'm sure I'll still be doing it in 5 years. Do you need a pool or a pond? I would say you do need either of those if you're going to do a conversion, unless you're just really interested. Absolutely, there's loads of interesting stuff. I am going to be actually releasing a smaller course that's just the theory of that. If anybody's interested in that, that'll get emailed out soon. How much time does it require? There's about 2 hours of video content. And, you know, I would say you want to work through it. You know, you could bang it out in a few days if you had nothing else to do, the theory, but it's good to work through it slowly over a few weeks. And then, as I've mentioned before, to actually build it, if there's 2 people, I would say 3 days once you have all your materials, and it might take you some time to source materials. And what is, yeah, I think I've answered all of that. So what about hot or tropical climates? I've seen there's a couple of questions for this in the comments, and I promised that these would come up. So the water needs to stay below 26 degrees Celsius or 78 Fahrenheit. If it gets warmer than this, the plants will struggle to grow, and it gets dangerous with pathogens because they like the water warm. So this is in Cape Town, we're in a temperate climate. It's not really even though it can get hot here in summer, it's not really a problem. It can depend on the microclimate of the pool. If the pool has no shade and it's up against 2 white walls and it's baking hot in the middle of summer, the plants can struggle to grow. They slow down. But it still works. It just takes a bit longer. If it's nice and sheltered, and I don't mean by totally shaded out, just wind sheltered, not like hot white walls, some vegetation around the pool, like a cool garden, totally fine. If you're in a very hot tropical climate, then I do recommend a UV sterilizer. Somebody did ask, does that not kill beneficial bacteria? It'll kill anything living that is passing through that water. But remember that your floating wetland, all of your good bacteria tends to stick in the biofilm and stay in the floating wetland. If like a bird poops in the pool, and that's where you're swimming, that'll get sucked in through the sterilizer and those pathogens will be killed. And then, they'll go through the wetland, which will further aid in killing them. But just to be 100% sure, I advise a sterilizer. And then you want to try and keep it cool. And you can do that by putting, in the heat of summer, putting a temporary shade over half of the pool. Either just putting a cover on the pool or pulling, like a raised shade over it. Aeration is very good. So you get aerators on the jets. You can create little fountains. As long as you aerating the water, that cools it. And the more of that you do, the cooler it gets. And then lastly, hydrogen peroxide works very well. So hydrogen peroxide, it's if you're not familiar, that's bleach essentially, and it oxidizes and it will kill. It kills algae and it kills pathogens very well. The nice thing about it though is that when it's done doing that after a few hours, all that's left is water and oxygen. So it's actually good for plants. It doesn't kill tadpoles. It doesn't kill fish. If used in the right dosage. So it's quite gentle on the wildlife. It's going to kill some beneficial bacteria in the water, but the whole ecosystem remains intact. And that is another, there's people who are doing this in Bali, at a resort. I've suggested all of these things to them because you don't want to be messing around with getting people sick in very hot places. So they're absolutely possible, and you've got those methods at your disposal. Where's my... Hang on, guys. I'm just looking for my comments. There we go. So cold or freezing climates. To be honest, I haven't tested this yet, but in principle, it should work fine. I currently have someone testing one in Europe, and I will know in about a year. I've looked into it. There are people who use floating wetlands to treat effluent in Canada, and they say it's fine. There's no reason why it shouldn't work, right? So if you have sedges, aquatic plants that die off and then shoot back in the spring, they should do exactly the same thing in a floating wetland. It's actually quite a nice insulated home medium for them to survive in. But I can't say for sure. And then what about maintenance? So what does change what doesn't change from a normal pool is the mechanical filtration. So whatever you were doing before is going to be quite similar. And that, if you were using a net to scoop out leaves, if you were running your sand filter, maybe you had a suction robot cruising around on the bottom of the pool. So if you want the same level of cleanliness, you would keep all those things going. The wetland is biological filtration, so it's keeping dissolved nutrients out the water and keeping algae at bay. You can, of course, forego all of that if some people, as you saw the examples with the more pond-like pools, they don't care. They collect some leaves or some sludge, they're like, whatever, they go for a dip occasionally. So it's kind of a personal thing. There's no more amateur chemistry with acid pH stabilizer, soda ash, chlorine. You're not constantly trying to stem the force of nature. You are harnessing it. Natural pool wetland maintenance is like a garden bed. So it's actually enjoyable form of maintenance. And you really only need to prune it once a year. Pull out dead leaves, cut back the plants, give it a good pruning annually. And that is about it. Running expenses. So essentially it's much cheaper. You're removing the cost of chlorine, which can be around $50 per month, 1,000 Rand a month. Obviously that's depending on the size of the pool, but on average. So you can scratch that cost. So if you do this conversion, you'll basically be paying it off in about 16 months from the chlorine alone. Energy costs will be about 50 to 20% less. And remember, I said there's a whole lot of different scenarios with the submersible pump, the existing pool pump. You can use both, you can use one or the other, and there's pros and cons, and I go into that in depth in the online course. But on average, 50 to 20% less. And then remember that cancer and asthma are very expensive as well. So you can scratch those costs off the list. What color will the water be? So I've got a nice example here for you. This was a white fiberglass pool.
Just back here
that was converted. So you no longer have the turquoise
when I
blue.
posted about this last, some people didn't like the fact
turquoise
that the water
blue
was
kind of
green, and as you can see,
looking pool anymore.
shot here from
This is the biofilm that you can see.
This water
so in a white
is
pool, it's clearly
clear.
evident. You can see this water is beautiful, right? It's crystal clear, but there's a good look at the biofilm.
See the edge there? It's perfectly clear.
So that's what you can expect with a white pool.
And the biofilm is this very fine.
Grey and dark pools are better,
that
which
develops.
is
So
why
this
that's
is
often
white
preferred with natural pools, because
fiberglass.
you don't see this kind of mottled discoloration.
That gives it this kind of emerald look.
A lot of people are perfectly happy with this way. You can see it as well.
See there.
Very slight kind of fuzz. Very healthy, perfectly normal, perfectly natural. That's a grey pool with a floating wetland. You can see how you don't pick that up. Yeah, that you've seen. And there we are back to the beginning. So let me look at some of the questions in the comments here. It's gonna go full screen. Okay. So, aside from cost, are there benefits to the gravel plant system versus the floating wetland? That's a good question. So maybe a benefit is that you'd have stability a bit sooner. Even though they take a while to establish as well, for the floating wetland, you have to grow all the plant's roots, which, as I say, can take 6 months to a year to really stabilize, where maybe in 2 months, because the biofilm forms on the gravel, it gets cleaner sooner. And with a gravel wetland, you maybe get more design flexibility. You can put it outside the pool. I mean, there's no reason why you can't. Some people have done quite creative things where they've used sort of IBC flow bins, like water tanks outside the pool with floating wetlands in them. There's no reason why you can't, if you want to preserve space in the pool and not lose that 1/3. But gravel wetland you can build outside the pool. So you get a bit more design flexibility. Maybe you want to have spillways and things flowing over from one to the other. But yeah, that comes with greater cost. But otherwise, no, I can't think of any other benefits. So any tips on building natural pools from scratch? I'm not going to go into that now. I do have a course on that coming up, so just make sure I have your email address. What about winter? Okay, so I've covered that. The freezing. Normal pools have to be emptied and cleaned. So yeah, if you need to empty the pool, as I say, I don't know. I haven't had experience with having to empty the pool. You could empty it and take the floating wetland out and then put it back in, but I can't answer that with great confidence. So let's see. Is it possible to create a floating wetland in another place close to the swimming area? So I kind of just went into that, right? So absolutely, yes. So you can create you want it to be at a minimum about 70 centimeters deep, 2 feet, call it. You can do that with a series of tanks. I actually did it for someone with one of those kind of giant kiddies inflatable pools with a water tank with a floating wetland in it to keep that water clean. You could do a series of tanks. You could build another waterproof structure to put the floating wetland in. Absolutely, you can separate them. You can get very creative. How long do these hold up to extreme weather? I live in Spain. We get winters -2 and summers between 38 and 45. That's not a problem. -2 is absolutely fine. 38 and 45 degrees Celsius, that is hot, but I did go into climate and how to mitigate that with the very hot places. So absolutely possible. So somebody's asking they want to preserve the deep side of the pool. So depth doesn't really matter. You're still going to work on the 1/3 rule for surface area, because the really deep water, the sun doesn't penetrate deep enough. It doesn't contribute massively. If there's a much larger volume of water in the pool. Look, if you've got the space to increase the size, by all means do it if it's a very big pool. Yeah, but by and large, you can stick to that 1/3 principle. Yeah, okay, I spoke to that. Okay, somebody says, I'm afraid how to protect my kids from not falling in as it cannot be covered. So that is a real concern. You'll just have to gauge that. I have, we saw with Nicole and JP, they had young kids. What we did was we bolted the floating wetland to the sides of the pool so that it can't actually sink if it's stepped on. And they still kept their cover, and the cover went right up to, so the floating wetland had an edge. The cover went right up to the edge, one of those kind of bolt-on covers, and just went over the edge of the wetland. So they found a way to make that secure. Harold is asking if you converted your sand filter to a mechanical biofilter. That's a good idea. A bead filter is amazing. Look that up. It would never work on its own, but it would have some biological cleaning that's going to contribute to your floating wetland. So an excellent idea to do in addition. For those of you interested, you can look that up. Sand works, but can clog with the natural water if it's not backwashed regularly. Glass medium works excellently if you upgrade to glass. But a bead filter is an excellent option, and you can actually convert your existing filter to a bead filter. But anyway, that's a rabbit hole. Robin's asking where you can buy aquatic plants. I've got complete supplier lists in my course with materials and plants for South Africa. In terms of the plants, I have some for overseas where I've been able to find them, and people are always contributing, and then I have South African ones. Okay, what else do we have here in terms of questions? I think that is it. Somebody asked about floating wetlands. Can you touch on how these can work with the use of the pond by wild birds? So there, I'm not exactly sure what's being asked there, but if you put a floating wetland in a pond, they're amazing for birds. It's amazing for nesting. So it's a safe place where they can't be reached by many predators. And you get birds that often are under threat on the banks of rivers or ponds are able to safely nest on the floating wetlands. So they're amazing for wildlife and for birds in that regard. Does it work with an aquarium? It does, absolutely. The only thing is sunlight. So, you would need your aquarium to be near a window where it's getting sun so the plants can grow. Is it a good idea to cover? Yeah, the aquarium in the background is kind of near the window. I don't have a floating wetland in there. I have soil and plants, lots of plants growing in it. So it's a mini ecosystem in that sense. Is it a good idea to cover the surface of the water at nighttime? After some years with the development of plants, their weight cannot come too big for the floating wetland system. Okay, so there's two different questions. So, in terms of covering the water at night, not really. So covering the water is good to avoid evaporation during the day and to keep leaves and things out, but not really necessary at night. And then the plants, so the system that I design it's very robust. So it has substantial flotation underneath it. So even if the plants get very big, the system I have, and I've been doing this for years and doing these for clients. So we figured out a way to make them not sink, basically. So they don't sink. And you want to prune them over time. And I also advise which plants to avoid, because I've seen these done badly. And people put, cattails in them, plants that, will grow to 2 meters, and then they fall over. So we tell you to avoid certain plants for that reason. Somebody's asking, can you add white sand in the bottom of the pool? I wouldn't do that, just because it'll get stirred up when you walk on it, and it will be very hard to vacuum and clean. If you've seen that done on social media, there's a very particular way where they have water moving through sand at the bottom to create that effect. Are you familiar with aquascape system for natural pools in the US? I am. I've done similar things. I've built in the beginning, you remember there was a swim pond with a 65-meter river and a waterfall, and we built a giant bog filter for that. wetland filter, which was influenced by the aquascape system. What we use for gravel wetlands is very similar. There's many different ways of going about it. But aquascape is great. We can't get a lot of those products here in South Africa though, so we have to improvise. And that is it. Somebody's asking if I ever built pools close to livestock and farms, and is there a risk? No, I shouldn't think there's any risk there. Look, your only risk, excrement often carries pathogens. And if excrement from livestock is getting into the pool, there's a risk, but that shouldn't really be happening. It's, you know, I'm imagining you're not going to have the pool right next to a bunch of cows. And it's not going to, you know, if it's across the way on a field, it's not going to somehow make its way into the pool. And as I said, you know, people swim, I certainly do, and lots of people in South Africa at least will swim on dams on farms all the time, and I can guarantee you there's a lot more pathogens in those dams than in a highly filtered natural pool system. So yeah, I'd say there's nothing to worry about. Okay. So someone's asking, can you put gravel under the floating wetland in the deep end? Yeah, you can get very creative if you want, and this is what the forums are for, the live Q&A. I'm happy to, if people want to do hybrids and get a bit creative. You can put, you know, pot plants in the water with gravel and plants. You're not going to be moving water through that, which is quite key to understanding. If you just put a plant in a pot plant, it's not going to, it's going to do something because it's going to be pulling nutrients out of the water, but you want to be creating aerobic conditions where you're driving water through the root zone, which you wouldn't be doing in that instance. Rock and gravel in the bottom of a pond. So that's totally cool. Riverstone or pebbles or large gravel is good. You don't want something too small that's going to be hard to vacuum. We actually did a very nice pool where we put riverstone on the bottom. It can look very beautiful. But muck and leaves are going to settle, and you're going to want to be able to vacuum that up, unless you're going for more of a pond vibe where you can leave it. But just keep that in mind. Do plants propagate themselves? They do. So if I take you back to the beginning here, you can see, you know, that's kind of what you'd start out with, and they very quickly spread. Some of them have rhizomes and spread very quickly in that way. Some of them will send out shoots. Yeah, so they do. Cool, lots of thank yous. You're absolutely welcome. I'm going to, I think the questions are starting to dry up. You can keep them coming if you want. I'm going to just post some of those codes I promised you guys. Okay. Just bear with me. you know what I'm going to do while I'm posting this. I'm going to play this.
First time getting into a natural pool, you can immediately feel the softness of the water. It's such an evident thing that when you're present in a natural pool, it just feels softer, just feels more aligned. Being recent custodians of this property and landscape for the last 1 year, we were always drawn to this type of environment. And coming here, really just wanted to be more a part of it. And we looked at the pool, and the chlorinated pool definitely felt disjointed, and it felt like it wasn't a good combination. So we definitely made the move and decided to make a good move to move towards a natural pool.
So Andy's asking me what's changed in our lives since we had the pool, and it really is something that has been just so giving. It's just been every day. It's grown with character and light and the love that the kids are, you know, playing and interacting with this living thing that is right on our doorstep.
It's a game changer for us as a family. We even find ourselves when the municipal water is out, you know, literally bathing ourselves in our pool water. We love the fact that it grows and that it's part of the ecosystem around us, especially where we are, and the fact that it inhabits frogs and different types of aquatic life, which is really incredible for us to watch, especially for our children to observe the growth. So yeah, so maintenance has really been easy to maintain. Previously with chlorinated pools, it was always a mission. I mean, always trying to test a pool and put in the right chlorine, and you're just almost scared about how much chemicals are going into the pool in order to get that clarity that you so-called look for, which is really not something that we would look for. But just because it's that type of pool, it needs to stay super clear. This pool has almost needed nothing of our attention, purely just to keep the leaf skimmer on, and that's pretty much it. And then the rest of it does itself besides filling it up the water. Super easy.
Hi guys, I'm back. So I posted all of those coupon codes for people who requested them. Remember, if you were wanting, if anyone who missed it, if you are wanting the 10% discount for live attendance as your reward, just put 199 in the comments and I will give you a unique coupon code that you can use. I've also put the link to where you can check out the course, the full details of the course, as well as a checkout page where you can buy that course. There's some more questions here. Somebody's asking about frosty climates. Yeah, so I went into that. I've got somebody trialing a floating wetland in a climate that freezes. So I don't want to say that it's my feeling is that it works because there's no reason why it shouldn't, but I haven't tested it. Somebody else mentioned that they actually have to drain and clean their pools, and I don't know practically what that might look like in terms of having to remove a floating wetland in a freezing climate if you had to drain it. So let's wait and see what that trial comes back with. Cool. Okay, guys, it looks like that's it. As I say, the current course has opened as of today. It's available to purchase for just 7 days. I'm going to email you with follow-ups, just with links and reminders for those of you who are interested, but maybe need a little bit of time. Yeah, as I say, if I missed anybody out, let me know. I don't think I did. Otherwise, I am going to end this webinar. Thank you all for attending. It means a lot to me. It really does. It's been great. I've had fun. I hope you've had fun. I mean, this is, yeah, it's quite easy for me because I could talk about natural pools for a very long time. So it's an absolute pleasure. And yeah, otherwise, take care and I will be in touch. Cool. Ciao, everyone.